of attention last week, but probably should have. Director of Government Accountability. Patrick, welcome back. Big 550 KTRS. Patrick, are you there?
Yeah, are you there?
I'm
Hello?
here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, good. Patrick, of course, with the Show Me Institute. All right, so last week, the census released some numbers. Over the last year, the city of St. Louis lost net migration, 4,500 people. What's the big deal?
Well, I don't think that the big deal is what was oftentimes a headline, which is that St. Louis had dropped from the 20th biggest metropolitan area to the 21st. I think that's not so big a deal, but I think it's the continuation of a larger trend that is a problem. The region itself has been suffering, but the city itself continues to get smaller and smaller. And, you know, there are probably three big issues that have been well known for years and years and years that the city has to grapple with. Crime is one of them, education is another, and tax policies in the city. I was a resident of St. Louis City for 9 years back in the 2000s, and I think that's something that everybody recognized were problems that the city just wasn't willing to grapple with. And if you're to summarize in kind of one idea or one phrase, it's the fact that there isn't the kind of trust between government and the people that would be governed that's required to make a city grow and prosper. It's one thing to talk about wanting millennials to come to your city or wanting people to, you know, come to the city and stay in the city, but it's another thing to actually meet their needs. And if you can't feel safe, if you can't have your kids educated there well, and if you don't think that they're looking out for your pocketbook, that's a recipe for disaster.
But the things, yes, we can agree with that. But the things that Steve Ellman deals with in St. Charles is very different oftentimes than what the mayor of the city of St. Louis is dealing with. If you lived in a house 50 years ago that could house 850,000 people or 1 million people, and that same house today now only lives 350,000 people, you can't downsize. You've got a lot of costs that are killing you in terms, right? So there's nothing they can do if they're still living in this giant house that was built for 4 or 5 times the population.
Well, I think that's true to a certain extent for sure. But I think that, you know, there was another story that came out last week that talked about how much the city was giving away in tax revenue. So if you're looking to keep tax revenue in the city, like I understand that. But the problem is it's not just people leaving the city. It's the city also giving away $30 million a year in revenues to, you know, development projects and entertainment districts and all the rest. So, you know, I agree with you. I think you're right. I mean, the city of St. Louis was built to be a larger city. It is about a third of the size as it was back in 1950 when it was at its heyday. And yet today we have, you know, certainly less than half and almost a third of what we formerly had. And I think that the infrastructure issues, you're exactly right, that is the problem. But I think that, you know, if you ask folks, you know, do you want to move to the city under these circumstances, I think a lot will say no, because for one of those three reasons, crime, education, or tax policy. And it really does seem like the city isn't interested in really grappling with those really fervently. And until they do, I think that's going to be a problem.
Well, you know, they can't agree on anything. They pass a bill to redo the Scott Trade Center, whether you agree with it or not. The bill was passed, and then they wouldn't fund the debt, right? or they wouldn't fund the bill. So the work was done, but they wouldn't pay the bill, and they had a big fight over it. You're right. There's no sort of energy in anybody working together. And let me also say this. You're right with the tax giveaway, and then on top of that, the earnings tax. And then on top of that, we even didn't even mention the other story where there are these buildings that are these brick buildings that everybody wants to tear down, but some tree huggers holding on to it because maybe someday somebody will come along and fix this one beautiful building that is destroying 7 blocks around it. You know, there's a lot of bad news coming out of the city of St. Louis over the last couple of weeks.
Well, and you know what? I mean, every city has its problems, but, you know, we can only take care of what we can take care of. And the fact is that St. Louis City, I think for a long, long time, the battle hasn't been necessarily about taking the city forward, but about who's the king of the ruins that's left over.
Yeah.
And the truth is that, you know, St. Louis should be trying to be a competent steward of taxpayer money for the people who are there and for the people who might be there. And I think for too long, it's been kind of, you know, wound up in this finger pointing where, they think that the people to blame are the people who left, and then they forget about the people who are still there.
Right.
And I think that it's been an ongoing problem, and you can point at all sorts of issues, but I think those three big issues really undermine the sort of credibility and trust that people have with the city of St. Louis. And I think unless they change course, this is going to be a recurring story year after year.
Well, but then of course, it's not all their fault. There's a lot of things that sort of were given to them. But anytime anyone even has the audacity to bring up, hey, have the city remerge with the county, right? You have these county towns who are passing, legislation saying not in my backyard. We are not going to, bring back the city of St. Louis. So trying to change the tax policy, trying to change the structure of the city is met with resistance and closed doors.
Yeah, well, and you don't necessarily need to have the county buy into the city taking care of its own business better, though. I mean, St. Louis City still has responsibilities regardless of whether the county joins.
That's true.
But I think St. Louis City oftentimes still feels like it's the center of the region. So geographically, it is the center of the region. But the fact is that the political, weight and the economic weight is moving through St. Louis County and towards St. Charles County. St. Charles County is larger than St. Louis City is. And the fact is that St. Louis City needs to get the basics done right. They need to get back to basics, because I think you can build on that foundation, but a foundation of subsidizing entertainment districts and complaining about the past isn't going to get it done.
Yeah, true. All of those things you say are true, right? The power structure, the people are all moving away from the city. But it's awful hard to do when you've got, record homicides and schools failing, and, they don't have money to pay their bills, and the 200-year-old sewer system's broken. It's more or less, guys, we better hang together or we're going to hang separately.
Well, and but I do think that with the city, it's a situation where the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. I think if the city can commit to actually resolving issues that people actually care about. I mean, if you're a young family and you're thinking about, where you want to start your life and then live the next 30, 40, 50 years, you want to make sure that you feel safe. You want to make sure that you're getting value for your taxes. You want to make sure that your kids can get educated near to where you live. And if you can't, check the box on 1, 2, 3, or any of them, that is going to be a long-term problem, and St. Louis City has to grapple with it and stop complaining. Did
you come up with that phrase, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the next best time is today?
No, I didn't.
That's a good line. I might steal that. I'm going to say I invented that line, but there you go.
You have my permission for what it's worth.
Patrick, more stuff online, I'm assuming?
Absolutely. ShowMeInstitute.org.
Patrick, have a good week. Thanks for checking in.
You too.